Okay, Chair, we're now live. Good evening and welcome to this virtual Maldens and Coombe Neighbourhood Committee. My name is Sam Nichols, a member of the Democratic Services team at Kingston Council. We will now proceed with the appointment of Chair for the Maldens and Coombe Neighbourhood Committee and the Planning Subcommittee for the municipal year 2020 to 2021. Councillor Heap has nominated Councillor Simon Edwards to serve as Chair. Is that seconded?
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other nominations? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 That is agreed.
Agreed.
I now pass over to the Chair for the appointment of the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Sam. And I myself would like to nominate Councillor Heap to serve as my Vice Chair, both for the Neighbourhood Committee and the Planning Subcommittee. May I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second that. Happy to second that.
Well, I think Councillor Wookey got in first.
That's fine.
Are there any other nominations for those positions? And therefore, if there are none, and I have seen none either orally or in the chat function, is that agreed, or can anybody signal that they want to go to a formal roll call vote?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Before I close this part of the meeting, I just want to say a few words about two people, and indeed everybody, whom we have lost during this period. It's been a long time since we last met, and we last met in March. I imagine most of you will recall that. At that meeting, we had some presentation for community grants. One of those people presenting was on behalf of Rotary. It was a very well-known and much-loved Peter Hope. Sadly, just a couple of days after that, but not from COVID, although COVID was already upon us by then, although we didn't, of course, realise quite how much it was, Peter died. He wasn't only a stalwart member for many years of New Malden Rotary, but also a major supporter of our local community. As many will know, Peter and his business partner founded and ran the veterinary practice in Burlington Road for many years, and it remains today as an enduring memorial to him. He was an active Rotarian for 33 years, and he led the club as president on 2 occasions, devoting much of his time as a member to furthering Rotary activities linked directly to the local community. Among many projects, Peter's work did much to sustain the Christmas lights in the High Street and to bring about the return of the hanging baskets in the summer. He will be remembered by all of us as a warm and genuine individual, a much loved member of our town. I'd like now to invite Councillor Bass to say a few words about the Reverend Peter Holmes. Councillor Bass, please.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Edwards, for asking me to do that. As many of you will know, it was very sad to hear of the death of Reverend Peter Holmes in April, sadly from COVID. He was the vicar of St Peter's Norbiton for 30 years and welcoming to everyone. St Peter's Parish actually extends into Coombe, and he lived in the vicarage in Coombe Hill Ward in Wolsey Close. And I first met Peter when I was a new resident in Kingston and a new parent, and he warmly welcomed us into his church and baptised my eldest, who's now 26. And many locals like me will also know him, as well as from the church, from the former St Peter's Nursery and the Coombe Hill Infant and Junior School gates. He was a much loved and respected man, as clear from the number of people who lined the route to Bonner Hill. And Peter dedicated his life to serving the needs of some of the most vulnerable in our community, particularly the homeless and the disadvantaged. But he was a true visionary. He was influential in the early days of setting up Oxygen, the well-known youth charity, and he also set up the Joel Project, a permanent night shelter for the homeless. I know he will be sadly missed by the community, but most of all by his family, his wife Carol, and his 4 lovely children. And our thoughts and prayers are with them all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bass. Now, before we close this meeting, I'd like to ask us all to observe a minute's silence, not only for both the Peters, but also for everybody who has suffered loss and who has lost their lives during this period. Our thoughts are with all of them and all their loved ones. So if you would just observe a minute's silence from now. Thank you very much. Now, that actually concludes all the business of the neighbourhood committee itself. And those councillors who aren't going to sit on the subcommittee, the planning subcommittee, which will start in a moment or two's time, I invite them to leave this meeting and follow the meeting, should you wish, on the council YouTube channel. So I'll give everybody a moment or two just to do that.
Thank you. Will do.
Now, good evening again, and welcome to everybody to this meeting of the Maldens and Coombe Planning Subcommittee, and welcome again to anybody watching on our YouTube channel. And now we're into, if you like, the formal part of the meeting tonight. I'd like to make sure everybody, and I'm just checking myself, that my mobile phone is on silent. And not although we are often actually ourselves in our offices, and I myself have got a phone which I can't put on silent, but it doesn't ever ring. This is being webcast on our YouTube channel, and the copy of the recording is going to be on the channel shortly after the meeting. And I'd ask everybody to keep their microphones on mute unless you're actually going to speak, because that leads to less feedback and interference. We have a chat function, and if you want to speak, please use that chat function, and either I or my Democratic Services Officer, Sam Nichols, will pick it up. Please don't use that for comments or questions. Please just use it to signify that you want to speak. Just a little bit about the planning process for members of the public. The planning application process is sometimes called quasi-judicial. What that means is that we have to conduct it in accordance with fairly strict rules, both as to procedure and how we arrive at our decisions. We have to take into account national, regional and local planning policies, and sometimes also legal cases. And so we have to act reasonably within the bounds of planning law, and we are not free to determine planning applications by virtue simply of the weight of public opinion. Just want to introduce everybody tonight. I'll just call out everybody's name, just in the order I have it on my screen. And if when I call your name, you can unmute, just say good evening, so everybody can see you and hear you, and then mute again. So I'll start off with the councillors. I have first on the list, no particular order, as I say, Councillor Haar.
Hello, this is Councillor Haar in Beverly Road.
Thank you very much. And then Councillor Bass.
Hello, I'm a councillor in Coombe Hill Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Hello.
Good evening, Councillor. Councillor Wookey.
Good evening, Councillor First St James's Ward.
Thank you, Councillor. I seem to have lost my order. Councillor Fram.
Evening all, Coombe Hill Ward.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Bailey.
Good evening, Coombe Vale Ward.
Councillor Shepherd.
Good evening, Old Malden Ward.
And Councillor Aurora.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor in Coombe Vale Ward.
And I'm in fact of St James Ward. I think that's all the councillors. So far as the officers are concerned, we have a number of. Oh, I've forgotten Councillor Durham. Sorry.
Good evening, Councillor Durham, Beverly Ward. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Councillor.
No problem.
So far as officers are concerned, we have a number of people backing us up, but the principal officers are firstly there's Sam Nichols, from whom you've heard, who is our Democratic Services Officer.
Good evening, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. And we've also got Toby Feltham, who is our Planning Officer tonight and will be presenting.
Good evening, Chair.
Now, so far as public participation is concerned, there is a registration system, and you have to register in advance in order to be able to speak. And I know that in relation to one of these applications, a member of the public did want to speak but was unable to because unfortunately he didn't get in time. We have two speakers on the first item though, and they will be contacted when the time comes for them to speak. If they are unable to join the meeting, then one of our officers will read out on their behalf a written statement which they have supplied to us in advance, but I hope that won't be necessary. As I shall explain later, well, in a moment or two, I should say, I will be seeking permission of the committee to address the meeting under Procedural Rule 27 concerning 179 Maldon Road, but I'll explain that in a moment. Apologies for absence. Do we have any?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest of a pecuniary or non-pecuniary nature? We don't seem to have any of those. As I said, when we come to the application in relation to 179 Maldon Road, following legal advice surrounding predetermination, which I have explained to the objectors, or some of them, I will not chair the meeting and will in fact withdraw from the meeting and take no further part in it, save to ask the committee for permission under Procedural Rule 27 to address the meeting, and will do so if the subcommittee then permits it. So I turn now to the minutes of the meeting. We last met on the 12th of February as a planning subcommittee. May I, when the time comes, sign those as a correct record, and if anybody wants to disagree, can they put that in the chat function. Otherwise, I will take that as agreed. No, there's nothing in the chat function. So can we now, I will sign them when I get the chance. It won't be for a little while, I don't think. We have, as I say, 2 items on the agenda. And if I can turn to the first item then, which is Turnpike Cottage on Kingston Hill. And it's an application for demolition of the existing dwelling and garage and erection of a detached 4-storey dwelling with basement level, accommodation in the roof space, and single-storey double garage to the rear of the site. And so I invite our planning officer, Toby Felton, to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. I will now just share the screen with you, so hopefully you can see this. Can you see that?
Yes, it's just coming on my screen now.
Okay.
Oh, it just went blank.
Yeah, it's saying loading on mine, and now you should see the description of the development.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. I will proceed. Okay. Yeah. So this is an application for demolition of existing dwelling and garage and erection of a detached dwelling with including a basement level and roof space level and a single-storey double garage to the rear of the site. So here is the application site. It fronts onto Kingston Hill and has rear access from Warboys Road, where the garage would access. This shows you the application site, and from that you can notice there's a big tree that's in the front garden that would be retained. This just shows you some of the sort of constraints around the site. So the conservation area is opposite. This site includes a tree preservation order. This site is also located in a strategic area of special character. So just some photos of the property. So this is the existing property. And you can see the 2 adjacent ones either side, and obviously you can see the tree. Then this is looking left to Stokeberry, and this is the front of the application of the existing house, and then to the right is looking towards Elmwood. We have the rear elevation of the existing house to be demolished. And this is looking towards Stokeberry, the red brick building on the right. And this is looking towards Elmwood from the application site. And this is the existing garage from Warboys Road. The rest of the sort of garden is over to the left. So the application is for the erection of a replacement dwelling. The site area is 820 square meters, which is 0.082 hectares. The gross internal area of the new house will be 616 square meters. 3 bedroom, three car parking spaces, seven bedrooms. So this shows you the existing site and where the existing house sits, and the garage at the end of the garden, and obviously the garden to the side of it. So this is the existing ground floor plan and existing first floor plan, and this is the existing front elevation facing Kingston Hill, and the rear elevation, and 2 side elevations. So now we come on to the proposed replacement house. So we have the basement, and then the ground floor here, first floor plan, and the second floor plan and the roof plan with solar panels on the roof. This shows the proposed front elevation and the rear elevation, northeast, southwest side elevations, and this shows you a visualization of what the property would look like, and that's the rear. I think that's so. Just a couple of points just to pick up. Sorry, just getting technology. So we've had 5 objections from surrounding occupiers. We've had no objection from the neighbourhood transport engineer or the tree officer, subject to conditions. And in summary, our assessment is the proposal will provide a house of good amenity, will not have a significant impact on the amenities of surrounding occupiers. Existing tree will be retained, and the proposal is considered to preserve the setting of the Coombe Wood conservation area, and would not result in harm to the non-designated heritage asset of the Kingston Hill / Coombe Hill area of special character. And it would, as well as the solar panels, it would have a good standard of sustainability. So the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much, Toby. Now we have 2 registered speakers this evening, and I understand one of them is Nicholas Cobbold and another Avril Silver. And I see both of them are in the meeting. I would invite firstly Nicholas Cobbold, who is going to speak on behalf of the objectors, to address the committee. And I remind you that you have 5 minutes from when you start to speak to address the committee. And we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining and when your time is up. So, Nicholas, if you'd like to unmute yourself, and then when you're sufficiently composed and ready, address the committee for your allotted time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Very well, thank you.
Good, thank you. I'm the planning consultant who's been advising the neighbours on this application and here to object on their behalf. I'll be honest, I think it's inconceivable at the moment this application should be supported, as there are plenty of issues which haven't been adequately addressed in your committee report. This report, I think, lacks detail, doesn't make the correct considerations, and is unfortunately full of cut and pasted policy background without actually going into the considerations of the application. I'll give you some examples. The planning consideration section of the report, which extends to a full 61 paragraphs, does not once mention that there is a proposed basement here. It's simply not acknowledged at all, let alone considered. You've got a policy in your residential design guide, which is specifically titled Basements and Subterranean Development, which has 7 policy tests, yet it's not even mentioned in your committee report. Talking of loss of light, the officer's consideration fails to consider the impact of the development on Stokebury, the neighbouring property. I've written several letters of objection, and the side-facing bedroom window of Stokebury is identified in both of these as being directly blocked by the proposed dwelling. Again, the officer's report doesn't consider this relationship. You'll have seen on 2 of the photos right at the start of the officer's presentation that there's a 2nd floor side-facing dormer on the north side of Stokebury. This is the only window to a bedroom. At the moment, it looks over the top of Turnpike Cottage, but would now, if this is approved, look onto a steep pitched roof only a couple of metres away, and more importantly, a tall chimney there as well. So the proposed house will have an overbearing impact on this bedroom window. And whilst it may only be 1 window, the planning system requires proper consideration on the impact on every receptor. This is a principal room, it is a receptor. And therefore the loss of light and overbearing impact on this window must be a valid reason for refusal. Again, not only is it dismissed by officers, it's not even considered by officers. The chimney is an extraction point for a working fireplace on ground floor, so smoke will be coming out of it, and this will be emitted right in front of that dormer window again. Moving on to the design and access statement is pretty bold in its claim that the proposed dwelling has been designed to be of similar character to Stokebury and other neighbouring properties. with greatest respect to that, this is nonsense, and demonstrated more than anything by the extent of the flat roof. Crown roofs are, I learned this at planning school a long time ago, the most obvious indicator of overdevelopment, because essentially the design cuts off the top of the roof. It cuts off, in this case, 3 meters of the building in a failed attempt to make it acceptable in height. In terms of the tree to the front, the pine tree, this is covered by a TPO, yet the tree report submitted with the application, like the officer's report I've just mentioned, doesn't mention the basement at all. So how can it consider the impact on the tree? The whole of the front elevation of the dwelling will be in the existing RPA of the tree. It isn't just the foundations which are being dug into this existing RPA, it's a whole basement. As the basement will be deeper, the impact on the root system will be more. Again, it's not being considered. In terms of the construction method statement, we note there are long working hours proposed, including Saturdays, which will make life unbearable for the neighbours. Vehicular access will be to the rear by Warboys Road, which is a relatively minor road. There's a neighbour there, for example, who has a degenerative illness, and they need access to their property at all times. We can't afford to have this blocked. Restrictions on access are always there, but need to be imposed on Warboys Road, especially with more people working at home. The hours of work, they need to be properly constrained. However, please don't take that as me saying you can put conditions on as a way of moving this forward. We think the committee report is so lacking in detail and proper consideration that any approval will be challengeable. I mean that on the basis that the committee are lacking in sufficient details.
1 minute left.
Judgment. You're being asked to approve an application that proposes a whole house and chimney in front of a bedroom window. You're being asked to approve a development in the RPA of a tree, which the committee report describes as highly prominent within the Kingston Hill street scene, without any acknowledgement in the report of the groundworks for the basement, let alone the house of the size proposed. You're being asked to approve a house whose height is only achieved by cutting off 3 meters of the roof. I think this application is flawed. It should be refused on design grounds, on scale grounds, on the impact on neighbours, and the impact on a protected tree. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. If you can mute yourself, but stay in the meeting, because there may be some questions of you in a few minutes. If I can then call upon Avril Silver, if you can unmute yourself, please. Do we have you here, Avril Silver? I can see you are in the meeting. Can you unmute yourself, please? As I say, I can see you're in the meeting. Sam, have you been in touch with Avril Silver?
Yes, we've been in touch with her. I'm just going to go and try and call her now, just to get her to rejoin the meeting.
Thank you. Yes, I see she's left. We won't formally adjourn. We'll just pause for a moment. Avril Silver, are you with us now?
Simon, could someone call her just to explain what button to press?
I think Sam has called.
Yeah, just to confirm, I'm talking to her right now on the phone, Councillor Bass. So, Chair, just to confirm, Avril's having a bit of difficulty joining the meeting, so I'm going to send her alternative means of joining the meeting and to join via telephone call instead. So I'll just contact her via email.
Thank you.
Chair, I was just going to suggest, do you think it would be wise to go to a mini adjournment just so we can sort this all out?
If you feel that's appropriate, we can adjourn. What's the time now? It's 3 minutes past 8. If we adjourn to 10 minutes past 8, I'm happy that we should do that. And that what that means is that the live stream will stop. People can turn their cameras off, but if everybody can come back with their cameras back on and they're at 10 past 8.
I know, I've written down what.
Okay, Chair, we're now live.
Thank you, Sam. We're back in the meeting, so to speak, and we have Ms. Avril Silver on behalf of the applicant, whom we can't see because of IT problems, but we can hear. Avril, when you are ready, can you start to speak on behalf of the applicant? And you have 5 minutes. We'll let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when your time is up. So when you're comfortable, do start to address us.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I have listened to the objections and a bit of history of the project. I was approached by my clients who lived in Kingston for about 30 years of their life, and they've always dreamed to build this dream house in Kingston Hill. I looked at the site and I went through the usual process of carrying out a pre-application advice, taking the planning officer to actually come and visit the site along with the tree officer. So yes, there were constraints to the site which I was aware of. One obviously was the tree, which we actually had an arboricultural report and the survey taken out, and he recommended in terms of the basement that so long as we address the protection zone, we can maintain the house in this location. The current house footprint, so long as we address the same footprint of the existing house. So the report supported our basement proposal. The other issue, which I take on board the points about the design. To be fair, we did look at quality of design along Kingston Hill, and there are varying properties along there. We took elements of designs that were done in Warboys Road as well. The Gates House as well was quite an inspiration on the Georgian style. And I felt that the aesthetic of the house has the same grand appearance as the other properties, Stokebury, Hill Rise, grey tiles as well. So we felt we were on par with the higher caliber houses, really. Furthermore, the actual property seemed very small within its setting, and we had an opportunity to create a proper home for my clients, and they wanted to stay there. It's a lifetime home for them. They want to stay there right through for the rest of their lives, really. And we've designed it to accommodate them so they could have home help when they need it. And they also have a lift, so that would help them to move around the house as well. So this house has been designed for that purpose. I look at some of the points that have been raised against the development by varying neighbours. Pretty much similar points about overdevelopment. However, I feel that the house we haven't gone beyond building lines or footprints of existing houses. We've actually bought the house within a metre, more than a metre on either side, to help reduce the impact on other neighbours. In addition, we acknowledge that there's a dormer window in Stokebury. Having been to the site and looked at the dormer window, the outlook and impact of the Turnpike cottage as it stands is already, it's an unfortunate location to have a window to a bedroom facing the roof. Our impact of our roof now is pretty much the same as it has been. I would also say that we did a rights of light to really check that this would be acceptable, and the rights of light proved that we're not impacting on the light at all to that window. I've then looked at other properties further along Kingston Hill and discovered Am I out of time? Sorry, all of the houses had dormer windows overlooking other roofs. So, sorry. Okay, so that helped the planning officer agree with me on this one. Okay, I don't know if there's anything else. I'm ready to answer questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
I don't know if it's possible for you to mute yourself, because otherwise we might get feedback, but it may not be practical once you're on the phone. But if you could just remain as quiet as possible until...
I can do mute, actually. I can. I've discovered it *3, so I can do that. I'll do that now.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
That's very kind. Now, we now move to the next phase of the meeting, when I will ask whether any members of the committee have any questions to ask of the objector. Can you, if you do have questions to ask of the objector, and we have 5 minutes for this phase of the meeting, could you indicate that in the chat box now, please? Well, there's none coming. Oh, yes, there is. Very good. I can see 1, 2. And well, I see that Councillor Bass, you were first. So could you put your question to the objector, and we'll time the 5 minutes from when you start your question.
That's all right. I'm not going to be 5 minutes in my question. I just wanted to ask, so the objector mentioned about the basement, and I just wondered, I just wondered if he'd be able to elaborate a bit more on his objections to the basement, because obviously it's not something you can see from the top, given that the applicant has said that they've had assurance that the tree will be fine. I just wanted to understand a bit more about that, knowing there's springs and stuff around there.
Thank you, Councillor Bass. Nicholas, could you unmute yourself and answer that question, please?
Yes, no problem. Can you hear me again?
Yep.
Yep, good. My point was twofold, really. There's first the question of how the application has been assessed. It is a basement application. You have a basement policy, and there is no assessment of that policy or any consideration whatsoever in the report. So that's a sort of high level concern I had. In terms of the more principal level concern about the tree, is that the tree report shows the existing RPA of the tree going round, I'm going to say 10, 12 meters, something like that. And then it says, it's all right, we can squash the RPA of the tree up towards the road and away from the proposed house. Again, there's no consideration of how the roots of the tree are going to be affected by not only just foundations, which go, I don't know, a couple of meters, or sorry, a meter under the ground or whatever, but by a full basement, which goes 4 or 5 meters under the ground. But you're losing more roots and potential growth area for those roots by the basement. And it just seems remarkable to me that it's not considered at all in the tree report or in the officer's report.
Thank you. Can I now move on to a question from Councillor Bailey, please?
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned one of the objections was to smoke from the chimney. Is it a smoke-free zone? I think it'd be unusual if people could burn smoke fuel in London.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Mr. Cole, I imagine as a planning consultant, you can answer that.
I can comment on the fact that anything which leads a chimney will be emitting a level of smoke. Whether I'm not saying necessarily it will be a big black smoke from the 1950s or something like that, but there will still be a level of smoke. Otherwise, there's no point of having the chimney there. That chimney is literally in front of this bedroom window, 2 meters away from it, and at the same height as the bedroom window as well. So I think it's inconceivable that however clean the fuel is, it will be acceptable to have a window open with that chimney or with the fireplace operating.
I would have thought it's more of a design feature. We've seen.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I've got. You could possibly make a comment about that. I don't want to interrupt you, but I've got one more question, and we've only got 5 minutes. Councillor Aurora, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question's centred around, you mentioned there's a dormer window which faces the chimney. The question is, does that bedroom have another window in it, i.e. another aspect?
No, it doesn't. It's a single aspect bedroom which has this dormer window facing directly north towards the application site. It currently goes, the view is over the roof of it, and the view now will be straight into the pitched roof.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions of the objector? I don't know how much time we've got remaining.
It's 45 seconds, Chair.
Thank you, Martin. If that's a no, I'll bring this stage of the meeting to an end. Thank you, Mr. Cobbold, very much. And if I can then ask the committee again to indicate in the chat function if they have any questions of the applicant. I have a question from Councillor Bass. Councillor Bass, again, we'll time the 5-minute section of this meeting from when you start speaking. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I have some questions that I'll probably ask the officer as well. But to the applicant, I was wondering what sort of hydrological survey they were planning for the basement, because obviously there are springs in that area. And the other question is, what's the height of the proposed build compared to Stokebury? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Silver, can you answer those two questions? It may be actually on the height. The officer can refer to a plan and present it, and we can see it that way. But you may be able to help on that. If you can unmute, if you can, Ms. Silver. Oh, yeah, you're
hello.
back. Thank
hello.
you very much.
Right, hello.
Did you
Sorry.
do those questions?
Technology. Okay, first of all, the basement, we're doing another soil survey to check the water levels. There is more to discover on the land. We've already have carried out a soil survey, and the soil, there wasn't a big impact, so we do need to do further surveys on that. I'm not sure if there's much more I can say at the moment on the basement, although I know that further along they have tried, they've done other soil surveys to discover the water levels there. So we will have to design the basement around whatever the impact is on the soil. So I can't say too much on that at the moment. But I can, there was another question on, oh, what was the other question? I've forgotten what it is. Oh, the height, sorry. The height, yes. Yes, apologies. Actually, the best thing to look on that is that street scene elevation. It so clearly shows we're almost a metre less than Stokebury, so we're quite a significant drop. I haven't got the dimension on it, but it's almost better to see if you look at the street scene elevation. I'm not sure if we can get that from the planning officer. Toby could.
Well, we can deal with that when the planning officer sweeps up, I think.
Yes, the street scene actually shows quite clearly that it steps down from Stokebury, and it's taller than Elmwood, but shorter than Stokebury. Yeah, so that's that bit.
Yes.
Thank
you very much.
Sorry, thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the committee? Otherwise, I have one very quick question arising from questions of the objector. I'll ask it then. The chimneys, which are clearly visible on the photograph, and one of them will be next to a few meters away from the dormer window. As regards any fireplaces, what sort of fireplaces are envisaged in the rooms which the chimneys on the south side anyway, because that's where Stokebury is, serve?
Yes. First of all, the chimneys were put there more aesthetically for balance and to sort of mimic perhaps some of the Stokebury characteristics of the chimneys they have. We have pulled the chimneys forward so it's not directly in front of the window at all, and that was, obvious reasons we did that. But my clients are not fans of log burning stoves and smoke in that way. They wanted to have a gas fire that would flue out the side. So it's not we're actually not running a flue through the house to form proper smoke. I should have mentioned that earlier, actually. That's a good point. We're not doing proper smoke fires with coal or log burner stove. It's going to be gas fire, or there was a bioethanol fire on the other side as well.
Yes. Well, thank you for that indication.
I mean, the truth is, yeah, sorry.
Oh, carry on.
They don't really need fire. Sorry, I was going to say they don't really need
5 minutes.
heat.
Oh, is that 5 minutes? Thank you very much, Martin.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. I need to stop you now because the 5 minutes for this stage of the meeting is up. I would ask both you and Mr. Cobbold to leave the meeting now and watch it hereafter on the council's YouTube channel, if you don't mind, and that way we will probably get less interference from feedback and so on. So if you could both do that, I'd be very grateful indeed. Thank you. Now, if I can turn back to you, Toby, can I ask you to sweep up? I particularly like your thoughts about the extent to which policy guidance 43 in relation to basements has been considered and whether there are any indications that it has been broken. Indeed, I'd like you also to comment on loss of aspect and light, if any, to the dormer window in Stokebury, and if you could also comment on the possible effect of the basement on tree roots, and the mention of the hydrological survey. After which, after you've swept up, there will be a full opportunity, unrestricted in time, for councillors to ask you questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, so there has been a basement impact assessment submitted in relation to this, which concludes that there should be there's no issues that would be affected by the construction of the proposed basement, and indeed it would not affect potential adjoining buildings if they wanted to do future basements. So that aspect has been covered. The applicants have also done a sunlight and daylight assessment, which now is probably a good time for me to just show that relationship. Okay, yeah, so can you see that, the street scene now?
Yes, we have it now.
So, so this shows the proposed sort of relationship in terms of heights and the relationship there. So, I think the window that we're talking about is the window to the left at the top, which faces towards the chimney and the roof of the adjacent of the proposed property. Now, the applicant has submitted a sunlight daylight assessment, which has looked at the impact on all windows in terms of sunlight and daylight, and has not found any issues in terms of that, any significant losses. Clearly, there will be a change in outlook for this window, but it obviously does face directly to this property, and so in my view would not be a reason why we could refuse a whole planning application because of the change in outlook from that window, but it would still retain good access to light. In terms of the council's tree officer has visited the site and has confirmed that they're satisfied with how this will impact on the tree, on the basis that the arboriculture report, method statement, tree protection plan are conditioned. So he's actually visited the site and is satisfied in terms of that. I think those were the three issues. If there's anything else, then please come back to me.
Thank you very much, Toby. No doubt we will, and indeed, Councillor Bass has already indicated that she wants to ask you some questions. Oh, it says you said you left, but it doesn't look like you have, Toby. But Councillor Bass, can I invite you to ask Toby any questions you have?
Yeah, thank you. Hang on, let me just. Yeah, no, thank you. So, Toby, you've covered the issue on height. Thank you. I think you've covered the issue on basement, though if you could elaborate, see if there's any further hydrological survey that's needed, because it is obviously an area of springs, and that, you know, would want to make sure that it doesn't impact next door houses. But the other question that I wanted to ask that hasn't been touched on is, if this was to be approved, I'm very mindful that Warboys Road, especially now that the car parks to Richmond Park are severely restricted, Warboys Road is a key parking area for Laddersfield Gate, and it's a very busy road with people coming and going all the time. What restrictions can we put on access to the site? Because I think through Warboys Road is actually going to cause quite a lot of problems. I mean, can we say that it would have to be through Kingston Hill, or what restrictions can we do to make sure that it's doesn't disrupt all the people who want to use the park?
Okay, thank you. So in relation to that, do you mean while this is being constructed, or do you mean permanently?
I'm talking about construction, because I think permanently with those houses, generally the garages are at the back. That's normal. But it's really during construction, given that it is kind of a key. I mean, anyone who goes up will see it's just people coming and going all day long using the park.
Yes, no, I'm aware that it is particularly busy at the moment. Although I believe they may be opening up the car park soon at Richmond Park.
Yeah, but sorry, but even if they do, it's always busy up there anyway. It's just, you know, both sides, and it's no. Yeah,
I mean, in terms of, I'm just looking to see if we have a condition about construction management plan, because obviously that we should have. and that will be sort of crucial really to try to minimize. Yeah, so there's a construction method statement, and this has to be carried out in strict accordance with that. I can see if I can find what that says, but I mean, basically, obviously, it is restricted in that we, you know, it's a busier road in terms of Kingston Hill, so it may be that having access off of there, and particularly given that you've got a tree, you know, you're not going to want to put any more pressure on that. So I would imagine the access would have to come from the rear. And sorry, your first question was.
So my first question, it was following on from the basement, talked about soil. Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so I mean, they've. I mean, we don't require them to do a basement before, impact assessment before this is submitted, but actually they have done one. Now again, I'm just looking to see whether we have conditioned that to be sort of carried out in accordance with that. I don't know that we have. So that could be something which we could do, and we could ensure that it carries on with the recommendations that are in the basement impact assessment, which I think, as the applicant indicated, they would be looking to do additional works following additional impact assessments subsequent to this. Just trying to see what if it. So yeah, I mean, it talks about all of those issues that one would be concerned about. So hydrology, hydrogeology, groundwater, surface runoff, deep groundwater, all of those kind of things, and stability and that sort of thing. So it then talks about on the pages about what the how it would need to be constructed to deal with those things. So it would be done by, you know, we're using some piling, and yes, it looks at those kind of aspects. So certainly, I think it should be conditioned to follow that, but they have actually done the work to show that there would be no impact.
Can I just come back on that? So are you saying that they've done all the work they need to, or there's further work that we should condition? The reason I want to push this is we have quite a lot of experience of, you know, the effects of springs in that area, and if it's not dealt with properly, it can actually affect the neighbouring properties. So especially with the basement. So are you saying that they've done everything they need to, or there's other stuff that we should condition?
Well, I'm just having a look through now. So yeah, so what they're saying is that they would monitor this as they went through to ensure that if they found any groundwater, they would deal with the drainage issues. And enable that to carry on, and they would they've said that the most suitable form of construction is contiguous concrete piling, and so yes, there's certain things which it would need to comply with this, because they set out some of the ways that they would construct this. So I think it would be reasonable to have it sort of built in accordance with the sort of methodology that they've set out here.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the officer? I have one or two. If no one has any at the moment, please don't let me stop you, and pop your name in the chat box if you want to ask any further questions. But my question firstly is, I noted what Ms. Silver said about the property not wanting to burn fossil fuels. I was wondering whether we could condition that so that there's a condition that the property that no fossil fuels are not fossil fuels. I mean solid fuels are burnt in the property. Not fossil fuels in general, because of course gas is a fossil fuel. So far as the condition about the basement impact assessment is concerned, I did note what Ms. Silver said about their obtaining further hydrological evidence. I wonder if that can be sewn into the condition you mentioned, namely that the applicant shall provide further hydrological evidence concerning groundwater conditions at the site, and the development should be built in accordance with the recommendations of any such report. I wonder if you could, Toby, comment on those two potential conditions.
Yeah, okay, yes. So certainly in terms of the basement impact assessment, I think that would be reasonable. The applicants indicated they will be doing that anyway, and their report indicates that as well. So I think we could have a condition which said that it should be approved in relation to this, but also seek additional information to so that they can show that they will do it in that way, and that they kind of keep a watching brief, I suppose, as they go through that process. So yes, happy to add that in. Regarding the no burning of solid fuels. Now, my understanding is that, as has been indicated, this is a smoke control zone, and if somebody does burn fuels which generate smoke, then it's for environmental health to enforce, and I believe they will sort of strictly do that. So there's already something in there which there's already legislation which stops them doing that. So I would be more minded to have an informative which referred to that legislation, and that they shan't do that, so that they're made aware of that. And obviously, if they do that, then the neighbours will be entitled to speak to environmental health and get them to visit.
Just to come back on that, but there wouldn't be a technical reason why we couldn't condition it by virtue of the proximity of that chimney to the window. Yeah,
I suppose generally we're advised not to, but I don't think it wouldn't be the biggest problem if we did. It would I suppose then mean that the potentially two teams would be enforcing it, but I suppose they could enforce it via environmental health. So that could happen.
Thank you, Toby. Councillor Bass again.
Yeah, no, sorry on that. I just think we need to be, well, in my view, I just would think we need to be careful about putting unnecessary conditions on it. I mean, I agree with the one about the basement. I'm not so comfortable with putting one about the chimney if it's covered by other things.
Yeah,
that's my view.
Yeah, well, if there are no further questions, we'll take that as a comment and move on to that stage, if we may. But obviously, if anybody does have any further questions of the officer, I'm happy to take them. Does anybody want to make any comments? Obviously, Councillor Bass, you may do so should you wish in any event, because you are a ward councillor. Well, not only because you're a ward councillor, but in your right as a member of the committee. But can anybody who wants to speak on this by way of comment, please indicate now in the chat function. Well, I'm not getting any. Councillor Bass, do you want to make any further comments?
Yes, it's me again. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, sort of being one of the ward councillors. I mean, it's always difficult with planning applications because obviously as a council you represent the residents and you want to keep them all happy, but on things like this you're always going to make one happy and one unhappy. I can understand Stoke Berry, obviously if they've got a smaller house next door, that they're not happy, you know, so happy with having this planning application next door. But however, knowing the local area very well, there's quite a lot of houses that I think look quite similar and of quite a similar scale. So I think it'd be very difficult to actually vote against this and turn it down. So that's my view. But it'd be good to tighten up the conditions on the building. What I'd like to ask is that the officers do look at the building plan, because that is such a key road, that Warboys. Is that something that we can just leave for them to tighten up after the committee?
Well, I think there's a standard condition there concerning the construction management plan. I don't know whether we can write into that a particular concern, or just indicate that we have a particular concern about the fact that Warboys approach is, I know, Warboys Road, I should say, it is a narrow road and well used both now and hitherto and hereafter by users of the park through the Ladder Star Ride entrance. And I would hope that either that can be written in or possibly just taken into account when considering the construction management plan.
Thank you. And just one further thing, the objector did mention about the timescales of building Saturday, but I'm presuming that's just the normal Saturday 8 to 12, and as long as it's you know, what's normally allowed across the borough, then I wouldn't have a problem with that. But can the officer just clarify that it is just normal building times?
I'll just see if I can find it in the hang on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it go beyond.
Monday to Friday 8 to 6, Saturday 8 to 1, Sunday and public holidays no working.
Thank you. I think that's acceptable if it's normal.
Those are the RBK standard hours, yes. So what I would do now is I would propose that we follow the recommendations of the report on pages A19 to A26, that is to approve, subject to the conditions there stated, but with an additional condition that and the wording of this will be sorted out more precisely later, that the works follow, or Toby will have a better word than that, the recommendations in the basement impact assessment report and any further hydrological evidence that is subsequently submitted concerning groundwater conditions on the site. Now, do I have a seconder for that proposal? Can someone say yes, please?
I'm happy to second that proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Durrant. We will then move to taking a vote by roll call. I'm sorry, this takes a little bit of time. And so, Sam, can I ask you to take the roll call, and each member, as we now do, can you indicate whether you vote in favour or against or abstain, and confirm that you've been present throughout the meeting. Thank you. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. I will now call upon each councillor in turn. Please can you indicate how you wish to vote by saying for, against or abstain. Please can you also confirm that you've been present for the duration of the meeting. Councillor Aurora.
Thank you. I vote for this item, and I can confirm that I've been here throughout the duration of this item.
Councillor Bailey.
I vote for, and I've been present throughout the meeting.
Councillor Bass.
I vote for, and I can confirm that I've been present for the whole meeting.
Councillor Durrant.
I vote for, and I can confirm that I have been present throughout the whole meeting.
Councillor Davis.
For, I've been present throughout the meeting.
Councillor Edwards.
I vote for, and I've been present throughout the meeting.
Councillor Frown.
For and present throughout.
Councillor Haar.
For and confirm I'm present the meeting.
Councillor Shepherd.
I would vote for it, and I have been here for the whole meeting.
And Councillor Wookey.
I vote for, and I have been here for the entire meeting.
So to confirm, Chair, that's 10 in favour, unanimous.
Thank you, Sam. Now, at this stage, I'm going to relinquish the chair of this meeting for the reasons I earlier stated. I will then leave the meeting but rejoin upon my application to address the committee. However, I don't want to leave the meeting without a chair, and so I nominate Councillor Davis to chair the meeting for the balance of tonight. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll be happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Bass. Are there any other nominations? I didn't think so. Thank you very much. And without wanting to delay matters, can anybody indicate in the chat function if they want to have a formal vote? Otherwise, this is agreed. That is agreed. I will now formally leave this meeting and hand over the chairmanship to Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Don't go too far away. So item 2 on the agenda is 179 Malden Road, New Malden. So we're going to just go straight across to Toby Felton to give us a summary of the application. Toby.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, can you all see my screen?
No.
No. Okay. I've done something wrong then. Let's have a look. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it coming up now.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is an application for the redevelopment of site following demolition of existing dwelling house and erection of two-story building comprising 8 residential units with associated landscaping, cycle parking, etc. So here is the location. So 179 was an existing house. I think it's gone now, and that would be demolished. That's on the corner of Thetford Road. Oops. And there you can see that in terms of its context and aerial view. This shows the existing block plan. And this is the existing front of 179 Malden Road. The property be demolished, and this is the rear. So you can see the rear of 179 behind the tree, and this is the side facing Thetford Road. So existing property, 2-story property, house. The lower property is 179, so that is the application property. The 177 is the one to the north. That just shows the adjoining one. At one stage, it was submitted as a combined application, but this is just for 179. And this shows the first floor plan of 179 and the roof plan. So this is the existing Malden Road view and the existing Thetford Road street view from the other side, and the view from the rear. There's quite a bit of history on this. So I'm just going to take you through some of the history in terms of what's been approved previously. So this is an application which was approved for 6 residential units on 179. And this shows you the ground floor, which is for 3 flats, and then the flats 4 and 5, so 2 more flats on the first floor, and a final 4-bedroom flat on the top floor. And this shows you the front elevation. So if you look at the top image, it's the image on the left is 179. And this shows you that, again, the top image is the Thetford Road side elevation. So that came in as an outline originally, and was approved as reserved matters for elevational details and layouts, etc. There's also been an approval for 8 flats on this site. So this is the same as we are considering tonight. This shows the site plan, and it shows the 6 parking spaces and the communal garden at the rear, and the front garden is left open, albeit I guess wouldn't be formal amenity space, but is a space that people could use. And so this shows the 3 flats on the ground floor. 3 flats on the first floor, and 2 flats on the top floor. So now we come to the application that we're considering tonight. So this just shows the construction management plan, how they would deal with that. This shows the car parking and the amenity space and the layout there. So these are the same as previously approved. This shows the landscape plan, including retention of some trees, and the proposed ground floor plan here: 3 flats on the ground floor, 3 flats on the first floor, 2 flats on the second floor, and the proposed roof plan. So this just shows the section as you were looking from Malden Road. So the property on the left is the one we're looking at, and this is what it would look like from the front and the rear. And this is what it would look right from Thetford Road at the top, and then the side elevation facing 177 on the bottom. This just shows as a proposed garden pergola sort of next to the sort of parking area and the communal amenity space. This just shows what that would what sort of size that would be. This shows you the Malden Road street view. It's just worth noting that there's sort of the building which looks like it's to the right of the colour building, which is the red brick building, which is a proposed building. There is a building which is from the Thetford Road, so it looks like it's in this street scene, but actually in reality it's not in this street scene, so it's slightly confusing that. And then this is a view from Thetford Road. And just see if there's anything else I need to add. Yes, as I say, there's significant history. There was also we've got submission in for the reserved matters for the 8 unit scheme, but that has not yet been determined. So that's although the information that is that's been submitted is broadly or is the same really as what was submitted with the outline application. And earlier on in this process, there was an application for 9 units, which included a basement, and that was refused. So the approval of this application would accord with the significant history on this site, which would be a material consideration in assessing this application. The application would provide the benefit of 8 residential units, an addition of 7 above the 1 unit originally on this site. This benefit, given the lack of a 5-year housing land supply, should be approved unless detrimental factors would significantly and demonstrably outweigh this benefit. We consider there are no matters that are considered to outweigh this benefit and therefore recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Feltham. As previously advertised, Councillor Edwards, under Procedure Rule 27, has asked addresses which we previously approved. So over to you, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Chair. I won't take long, I hope. As you know, this does have a bit of history, and there have been a lot of objections. The objectors were going to speak tonight, but unfortunately, because they missed the deadline, they aren't able to. I'm not here to present their views. I'm here simply to express my own views I expressed earlier, which resulted in my not being able to chair this meeting. I think we ought to remind ourselves of other aspects of planning policy, not only the tilted balance, but in the National Policy Planning Framework at 127F, we're asked to create places that are safe, inclusive and accessible, and which promote health and well-being with a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. And this, in my view, is a touchstone of what we're thinking about tonight. So far as the London plan is concerned, well, we've got the intent to publish London plan, which deals with private outside space at D6. And in fact, we actually have higher local standards in Kingston. I'll come to that in a minute. But the intent to publish plan says that a minimum of 5 square meters of private outdoor space should be provided for 1 to 2 person dwellings, and an extra 1 square meter should be provided for each additional occupant. Of course, in this development, there is no private outdoor space for individual dwellings. So far as the Kingston policy is concerned, that's contained in the residential design SPD, which we had referenced tonight already, and that's pretty clear again. New houses or developments should new flats should have 10 square meters per dwelling and 1 square meter for each additional occupant. And that's private amenity space. And again, we have none. If we did the arithmetic, we would be looking at there is a note in policy guidance 14 about communal amenity space, and that should be provided in addition to private amenity space, not instead of, but in addition to. It's 50 square meters per development plus 10 square meter where private less than 10 plus where less than 10 square meter private amenity space is provided. That should be added to the provision, and the maths is done in the report at paragraph 33. So we should have 144 square meters as a bare minimum of outside communal amenity space, and what we get is 90.3 square meters. I refer you back to slide 55 when you're having your deliberations, and you can see the exiguous nature of the communal amenity space. It's squashed in at the back between the car park and the back of the house. At the front, you've got a bit which is mainly bike racks or bins, I think, and then of course it's on the busy Malden Road anyway. So who want their children playing out there? Toby has mentioned the reserve, the fact that there's outline permission for 8 flats anyway. That of course does establish in planning terms that we have the site can accommodate 8 flats, but it doesn't go any further than that because the reserve matters, of course, include the appearance, landscaping, layout, and scale, and those are all matters which are open to the committee, and so you can take the lack of any private amenity space and the exiguous nature of the outdoor communal areas into account. You can contrast that to the 6-bedroom scheme, which again didn't have private amenity space. But if you go back to the slide, I can't remember now which number it was, which showed it. Yes, it's slide 48. You can see the much more generous communal outside space which was provided under the 6-bedroom scheme. Not entirely satisfactory, but way better. In addition, there are problems with the interior. They were actually highlighted very well if you had a chance to look at it, in Mr. Dubolet's statement and accompanying drawings. You've got single aspect dwellings. You've got bedrooms at the north side of the development, which effectively looks on the ground floor straight out onto a boundary wall. They're very, very close. On upper floors, they all have to be non-openable below fanlight level and obscure glaze below that. And these are bedrooms in the flats. And you have 1 or possibly 2, I can't remember, single aspect dwellings. And you have, instead of the neat lines of division in the 6-bedroom scheme, you have a patchwork of really poor quality designed flats. So it's my view, and this is what I stated before, and I haven't changed my mind about it, which is why I'm not sitting on this committee tonight. It's my view that these are impacts which, and they're clearly defined in planning terms, both at national, regional and local level, which significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And let's not forget, this isn't an extra 7 dwellings, it's an extra 2. So, but thank you very much for listening to me. And I will now leave the meeting, but I will follow it on YouTube. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. It's good to hear you pushing up our YouTube viewership. We don't have any registered public objector to the scheme, which means obviously the applicant's unable to speak to us either. So I'm just going to pass straight across to the officer, Mr. Feltham, to sweep up any of the comments that have been made so far, obviously by Councillor Edwards. So, Mr. Feltham.
Yeah, okay. So yes, in terms of, I suppose the amenity space is one thing. Let me just, it might be helpful if I try to illustrate this. So I'm just sharing my screens. Hopefully you can see that.
Councillors, while we're going through this, if people do want to ask questions, it would be good to put them into putting them into the chat now, if there are questions that you want to ask Mr. Feltham.
So yeah, so here we have this is the communal amenity space and the kind of pergola structure that we talked about. So this area here totals an area of 90.3 square meters, which we acknowledge in paragraph 33 is below the council's standards, which, if you add up the 50 square meters plus 8 lots of 10 square meters plus extra people beyond that, you get to a total of 144 square meters. So it does fall short of that, a shortfall of 53.7 square meters. So, I mean, our guidelines don't absolutely require that people have their own private amenity space. They require any shortfall in private amenity space to be made up in the communal amenity space, which it isn't. I mean, there is the area at the front of the property, which is supposed to be laid to grass and has a tree there. I wouldn't normally expect people to sit in their front gardens, but it's a reasonable sized garden, so you can decide how much weight you give to that. So, and then I think we'll just also have a quick look at the bedroom arrangements, and as referred to. So this is the ground floor. So you have the kind of main lounge here. It's the area where you've got along this boundary here, the northern boundary, where you've got a bedroom which does have a window looking out to the west. But yes, two are very close to the boundary, which is not ideal. Although in terms of when inspectors at appeal assess these applications, then they frequently look at the overall amenity of the flats, and often conclude, well, most of the flat has good light and outlook, and therefore occasionally where you get some aspects like this, they haven't refused them. So here we go to the first floor. So you've got a similar arrangement really in terms of the bedrooms. Living spaces do have sort of outlook, which is better, and again take you to the top floor. This bedroom, yes, is not ideal, but the others have good outlook. So I think that probably covers most of what Councillor Edwards was saying. If there's any other questions or point I haven't covered, then do let me know.
Mr. Felton, if I could just follow up on that, you've obviously recommended approval of this scheme, so obviously have weighed the lack of amenity or the diminished amenity on the proposal, and come out with a view that it still justifies approval. Could you just talk us through what the balance of that is in terms of the importance of this amenity space issue?
Yeah, so in terms of that, I mean, we National Planning Policy Framework sort of directs us here that if we, because we can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, it's paragraph 11D which refers to any these applications which provide additional housing, and this provides I suppose 7 compared to the initial. Councillor Edwards points out it's 2 compared to what's actually been approved in terms of the 6 units, but it's at the very least 2 additional units. It should be approved unless any adverse impacts of doing so significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. So when we come to our conclusion, we acknowledge that this is paragraph 68 of the report. The proposed development will provide 7 net additional market housing units. It's carried significant weight in favour of the proposal. Some minor impacts have been noted in terms of impact on the amenities of neighbouring properties and the under provision of amenity space. However, the disbenefits associated with development would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and as such, the development is recommended for approval.
Okay, so we're judging this based on the existing use of the land as opposed to any previous applications that have been done on it in terms of its numbers. Is that what you're suggesting there?
Yes, that is how we have assessed that. So yes, I guess we're assessing this overall application, but even if you were to assess it compared to the 6 units, you still got two net additional units, which still weighs significantly in favour of the proposal.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry if you can hear banging in the background. I think I might need to get enforcement out. I think somebody's working rather later than they should be on constructing a house. But anyway, I've got Councillor Wookey, Councillor Shepherd and Councillor Durrant. So I'm going to go to Councillor Wookey first.
To be 3 extra car parking spaces. How many car parking spaces do they have to have? Because if you didn't have the 6 car parking spaces, you could have a more amenity space.
Okay. So I missed the very first start of that, but I think you were saying that they've got 6 parking spaces. What would be the minimum that we would allow them to have? Yes. Well. Personally, I wouldn't mind if this had less car parking. Obviously, the disadvantage of that is that it can lead to overspill parking in the surrounding area. Now, there is I think, as part of the legal agreement to restrict this from any future controlled parking zone, but currently there isn't a controlled parking zone in this area. Yes, I suppose less could be provided, but obviously it has different impacts. Certainly, our engineers would say, "Oh, we would like it to have these 6 spaces." Now, let me just see what our standards say. So obviously all parking standards are maximum. So yeah, so 3. Let me just see if I can find that. 6 Austria. So yes, I mean the maximum probably would be slightly above the 6. So I guess you'd have that sort of conflict, but that's what we've got to consider is what has been put in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. I can't help but look at this and think that this scheme is, in my opinion, it's trying to test us. He's got permission for 6, then he came back with 9, and then about 5 days later, 8. And I do feel that because the language that we are using is that, oh, we don't have enough space, so therefore we almost have to let all these things go through. It's really worrying. It's really concerning me. And the impact that it has on people's well-being. That's current residents and future residents. If we are willing to say that it doesn't quite match our standards, it falls below the standards of outdoor space. If lockdown has taught us nothing, it is that we all need some space around us. And these dense buildings that are going up all over the place, and the concern that you buy into the borough and you buy your house, it's your dream property. And within a year, your next door neighbour sells that house to a developer who then wants to put up 9 or 10 flats. I really do think we need to consider the well-being of the people, the future residents of Kingston, but very much the residents who've already bought into this borough. Thank you.
I don't think that was a question, that was more of a statement, but thank you very much anyway. I don't know, did you have anything to say to that, Mr. Felton? Probably... No,
I don't think I did, actually, no.
Okay, fine. Councillor Durrant.
Thank you. My point was very similar, actually, to Councillor Wookey's point, which is that about the car parking spaces. If you look at it, it does seem that there are some small one-bedroom flats there, so it wouldn't be out of the question that you could say that those people are are going to be perhaps first-time buyers and probably more likely to take public transport. In any case, it's very well connected around there to public transport, and obviously not that far from the station as well. So I don't see why we need 6 parking spaces, you know, and we're trying to encourage people to cycle, to walk, and to do other methods of transport wherever possible. So can we, you know, again, have a look at that to see if we could perhaps agree to reduce the number of car parking spaces?
Mr. Felton, I'm pretty sure I've seen somewhere written down that the space standards, car parking standards, sometimes relate 0.6 or 0.7, I think it is, per unit. Is that not the case in that, or is that based on higher PTAL ratings than this particular location?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to see if we've got that calculation in here actually, because yes, I mean yes, there are certain standards. I can maybe let me see if I can find it, because I think that will be my easiest way. If it's not in there, I can do that calculation. It will just take me a little bit longer. I guess because we had 6 parking spaces, the issue of parking was not particularly an issue. Let's just say.
Whilst you're looking for that, is there any other? So I see that Councillor Aurora has got another question. If you could look at that, Mr. Felton, at the same time as listen to Councillor Aurora's question, I'm sure you can multitask.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair. My question actually has been answered, but I do agree with Councillor Shepherd, what she had to say. So if I could turn that into a question to you, Mr. Felton, would you agree with what Councillor Shepherd had just said?
So in terms of, well, I think, you know, obviously we, one of the aspects which, when we're looking at doing this balance, given that we're in a situation where we can't demonstrate 5-year housing land supply, is that there may have to be some impact on amenity. So, and I guess that's really where what we're balancing here. I mean, I think the issues in terms of the windows would be one aspect of the amenity of these units, but obviously also the one which is coming across is obviously the limited amenity space. And I suppose it would be a question, and I wouldn't normally consider areas that are in front of the property to be amenity space, but if you were using it as communal amenity space, you could certainly sit in the front garden, and that would be, you know, maybe okay. But yes, I appreciate you may not want your children to play in the front garden near to a fairly busy road. So, you know, we have having to make sort of difficult decisions, I suppose, and you know, this would be straightforward if it complied with all aspects. Not, as you'll be aware, not all developments do, but this is, you know, lackey in those regards. But in terms of weighing it up, well, it is some of these standards which may have to go. And we don't always get amenity space. It's not always possible to provide sufficient amenity space. But I take the point of the car parking, and that could potentially provide additional amenity space instead of car parking. And yes, I can see that there's an argument that might be easier to swallow than this. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Last question from Councillor Bass.
Yeah, no, it's just on the car parking. I just wondered, Toby, if you could remind us the sort of parking conditions around that area, like if there are any CPZs, because I just think it's I mean, you presumably calculated the number of spaces based on a certain ratio, and I think it's quite difficult if we start dictating whether people can drive or not. I don't want to encourage them, but if it just means that people are going to park on the street, then that's not very fair for existing residents. So could you just explain what the parking conditions are around there, please?
Okay, yeah. So yes, I mean it's not a controlled parking zone around there. Malden Road, you can't park on because it's a main road. So that probably does lead to some additional pressure in Thetford Road. I'm just having a look in terms of. But yes, I mean it would, in terms of the parking that you've got, say even along the length of this property, this, you know, there is some sort of parking spaces along there where it would be possible to park a car. So you know, if there were less car parking spaces, I'm not sure again that would lead to a sustainable reason for refusal. I'm getting closer to finding out the parking spaces, but I'm not quite there yet.
Maybe we'll come back to you in a minute on that, Mr. Feltham. Finally, Mr. Councillor Durrant, you've got a second question.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to ask if we had an idea how much extra space that would generate. So if you got rid of three parking spaces, would that? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try and show that plan. So can you see that plan with the red for the car parking spaces?
Indeed, yes.
So I suppose if you took those 3 parking spaces there, then you would get an extra. It would be something like 40 square meters or so, but yes, it would create a better space, because obviously you'd be able to incorporate this space at the end. And I suppose there's probably no better way really doing this. You need 6 meters really to get a car in and car out, and then you know, to have it on this side. So yes, you would get this sort of area here, which would be better, and probably would just trying to calculate whether it would comply with our standards or not. It probably would be. It probably would be about 50 square meters actually.
So it would be there or thereabouts.
Yes, absolutely. And certainly, yes, I must say I did look at this and think, well, actually, that would be an option if you were looking at this site. This wasn't how it was when I saw it. So, so this is how what you see is how I saw it. But then I thought, well, actually, yes, that is an obvious issue, and maybe if you had more amenity space, then obviously that would deal with that issue better. But yeah, I suppose it's a question, I suppose, really whether what we've got in front of us is unacceptable to warrant refusal, I suppose.
Okay, let's move this on. So let's finish the questions up, and we're going to move into to debate and eventually decision. I'm going to, as chair, I've always taken the view that you can't actually hold a debate unless you've got something to debate. So I'm going to move the motion that's that's laid out on A42 to A58. In doing so, I need to be clear that I'm not actually suggesting that I'm going to vote for this, because I might not. But I would be interested to hear a bit more about the debate. But I'm happy as chair to move the recommendations from the chair so that we can start the debate around it. In doing so, I mean, I'll happily give you my view as it stands at the minute. I've got a huge amount of sympathy for Councillor Shepherd's view about this, and not just the amenity space, but just the shoehorning of this building into the site that's there. I mean, it's not a very nice building in my view. It's an awful lot of windows on both flank walls, on both the Thetford Road side and the wall that is facing the other building, which is yet to be developed. And we must all wonder what the hell is going on when an applicant can't seem to make his mind up as to what sort of building they want to build. I mean, they keep coming back with different and revised applications, just adding more and more onto what's happened. I think where my problem is that we are, in my view, slightly stymied by the previous permitted applications, because in permitting them, we've established a benchmark, and the building effectively, from what I can see of it, I may be wrong, but what I can see it is essentially the same building. It's just they've managed to stick another couple of flats in the roof space. So it's very, very difficult, in my view, to see a way that you can turn this down. Now, there may be ways that we can imagine to come up with that give in effect, the turning it down and making them get on with the 6 flat ones. But I must admit, I'm struggling to understand what we can do about that. So at the moment, my view would be we probably are likely to have to permit this. But I would be interested in understanding what the rest of the committee feels about restricting that car parking, notwithstanding that it could push more parking onto local roads, although it would be car caps. So if a CPZ did subsequently come in, it would prevent that happening, prevent cars parking on the road. But I do wonder whether, given today's world, whether many people who want to buy a flat in that area would be persuaded to buy it if they didn't have a car parking space on the premises. It's quite possible they wouldn't. I don't know the answer to that, but it's kind of behavioural. So in summary, I think I'm probably in a position where I'm thinking we're going to have to reluctantly agree to this, but I would be interested to hear others' views about restricting that car parking to try and create some extra amenity space. Who would like to speak next? Stunned silence. So, would you like me to propose that we reduce the car parking? Can I at least nod in my direction? That would be helpful if you think that's a positive idea.
No.
Okay, so we've got one dissenter on the no on the car parking.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Sorry, let's take Marina back. Councillor Bass first.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
No, I just said it very briefly, but I think because I'd already given my reasons why, I just think it's quite difficult. I mean, we've just agreed, you know, a 7-bedroom house in Coombe with 3. These are people who can't afford that amount of space, and do we want to deny them cars? I think it's a bit unfair, really, especially as it will push it onto the roads. That's my view, and I accept that not everyone agrees with that.
Councillor Durrant, then Councillor Shepherd, then Councillor Aurora.
No, I have to say I disagree with Councillor Bass in that respect, and I think we should be encouraging people to take alternative forms of transport, particularly around that area where you see it's getting more and more clogged up as well. In that particular area, that would, if you took out 3 car parking spaces, that would still, you know, you'd only be adding 3 parking spaces on the road, and there are plenty of car parking spaces down that road. So I think, you know, on balance, and because of what we've seen in this COVID pandemic, people need that open space. That's the most important thing right now. So I would be in favour of this if we got rid of the 3 car parking spaces.
Councillor Shepherd, did you want to speak?
Well, I was indicating that Mark had put his name in, and I didn't think he'd seen it. But I actually agree with the car parking spaces. I also think you can give them 6 parking spaces, but you can't tell people if they can or can't drive, and you can't tell people how many cars they can have. So you can have 6 car parking spaces, but you may end up with another 6 cars out on the road anyway, because these aren't flats for single people. And although we would love everybody to use public transport, it's not that great. Let's face it. You know, there's a huge amount more people living in the area and no more services. So I do think the amenity space to me is the most important thing. I personally think we should just stick with the 6 flats if we have to. Give them some amenity space. You know, people will be happier living there. But if it has to go to 8, which personally I just think is greed, then I think you need to give them some space. I mean, really, if you can park your car outside but you can't sit outside, we're living in a very strange world.
And Roy, Councillor Aurora.
Thank you, Chair. My points have been raised actually the last 2 people actually. With regards to car parking, I don't think we should be reducing it, because as it stands, if you calculate 6 divided by 8, you're really only giving 0.75 of a car parking space to each flat. In addition to that, one has to be mindful that 3 of the flats are actually 3-bedroom flats, which by RBK's local standards, those are family units. Family units tend to have cars, and therefore I think if you reduce it down to 3, for example, that'd be way too small. I do, however, believe that more amenity space should be given. It definitely should be, to not fall short of the required 144 square meters, not significantly short anyway, but not at the expense of getting rid of the car parking spaces. The other thing is with regards to tilted balance, I'm often the first to say that because we're in a tilted balance situation, we have to allow something that improves our housing stock. I accept this one improves it. I know the report says we're going up by 7 units. We're actually not going up by 7 units, given that 6 units are already allowed. We're going up by 2 units, and I question whether that increment justifies us allowing this at the expense of the occupants not having enough amenity space, and potentially, given the early argument, not enough car parking spaces. I'm minded on this occasion, it is very unlike me, I'm minded to actually not support this motion. I'm minded to actually vote against this, because I do believe on this occasion, the actual incremental that we're gaining in respect to tilted balance is not enough to actually push this one through. I think they are squeezing too many units in a building which isn't, probably is just about big enough for 6 in the first place, I think. That's not me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I just want to bring us back into order again, because apparently we need to find a seconder for the motion as it stands. It doesn't mean it can't be amended. Can I have a seconder for the motion as it stands, so that we can actually continue the debate?
Councillor Davis, is that are you suggesting that we reduce the car parking sizes, number of car parking by 3 spaces?
I was going to come on to that. So what I'm intending to do here is we have to have a motion to debate. So let's move the motion to debate. And as I said at the beginning, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to vote for it.
Yes,
but it's at least a motion for us to debate.
Well, I'll second it, Kevin. If you need a seconder, it doesn't mean that I have to vote for it, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, not at all. Then we'll move to an amendment and say that we want to vote on reducing the car parking. So we'll have to have a vote on this, reducing the car parking to 3 spaces from the existing 6. So I'll propose that as an amendment. And if somebody wants to second that proposal,
I'd be happy to second that.
Okay. So that's seconded by Councillor Durrant. So we now move to a vote on that. So it's over to you, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll now call each councillor in turn. Please can you indicate how you wish to vote by saying for, against or abstain. Please can you also indicate that you've been present for the duration of the meeting. Councillor Aurora.
I'm voting against, and I have been present throughout the meeting. Thank you.
This just to confirm. This is for the to add the amendment.
I understand that. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
For, and I've been present for the meeting.
Councillor Bass.
Against, and I've been present the whole meeting.
Councillor Durrant.
For, and I've been present for the whole meeting.
Councillor Davis.
For, and I've definitely been here for the whole meeting.
Councillor Fram.
Against, and I've been present throughout.
Councillor Haar.
For, I confirm I'm present at the meeting.
Councillor Shepherd.
I'm against, and I have been here for the whole meeting.
Councillor Wookey.
For, and I've been here for the whole meeting.
So, Chair, to confirm, that's 5 in favour and 4 against.
Thank you. So we now have an amended motion, which is, as we previously discussed, with that amendment added to it. So shall we go for a vote on this amended motion, which is to permit the scheme with the adjustment to the parking? So, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Chair. So, as before, I will now ask each councillor to indicate how they wish to vote by saying for, against, or abstain. Councillor Aurora.
I vote against, and I've been here throughout the meeting.
Councillor Bailey.
I vote for, and I've been here for the meeting.
Councillor Bass.
Against.
Councillor Durrant.
For, and I have been here for the meeting.
Councillor Davis.
For, and I have been here for the meeting.
Councillor Fram.
Against, and I've been here for the meeting.
Councillor Haar.
For, I'm present at the meeting.
Councillor Shepherd.
Against, and I have been here for the whole meeting.
And Councillor Wookey.
For, and I've been here for the whole meeting.
So, to confirm, Chair, that's 4 in favour. 5 in favour and 4 against.
Thank you very much, which means that the motion is carried and the recommendation is for approval. Thank you very much, councillors. There are no urgent items that I don't think the previous chair has even authorised. So that means that we can end the live feed and conclude the meeting at 9:43. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.
Kevin, doesn't the other chair need to come back or not?
I think he's probably gone and had a glass of wine.
That's where I'm going. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.